Hi there. Swan in Love. What do we think? Well, what I think is when I got to the end of Swan in Love, I could quite easily have gone back to the beginning and read it again. And I'm only talking about the small Swan and Odette um, passage. I just love it. I think it's just so insightful and shocking about our obsessive qualities, our addiction to um, punishment, what love can do to us, what people can do to us, and all of that stuff. Um, but I think actually the thing I'm going to quickly talk about now is Swan is a very interesting character because actually, compared to the Verdurin, who we're led to believe, probably rightly so, they are sort of they're sort of callous and vulgar and appallingly aspirational. Um, I'm not sure Swann comes from a vastly different background, but he has ascended to the height of Parisian society um, because he's not aristocracy, he's not titled, he is Jewish. His money, his wealth seems to be vast, but come from business, um, which is a kind of bourgeois background in sort of French um, society. Um, the Verdurins are, enormously wealthy. I mean, they seem to disappear for years on end. So how has Swan? Because it seems at some point that it is impossible to make those those leaps, and people are very much stuck inside their own society. And but Swan has managed that to the point where people not only are very the Princess de Guillemot and all of these people in that party scene. They're sort of desperate to be around him, and they're also desperate to forgive him this terrible liaison he's had, this terrible situation where he's in love with what is essentially a charlatan. Charlatan? What are we talking about? Courtesan. It might be that Swan is a charlatan. So what has Swan got that means that he's managed to make that tradition and those connections? He's obviously wealthy, but that doesn't count for anything. Um, he's not a great wit. Um, he has a kind of sort of I don't know. He has a sort of ennui that perhaps the aristocracy enjoy, or kind of world weariness. I mean, he's been like maybe they enjoy someone who's been writing the same essay on Vermeer for years, but will never finish it. That they approve of that attitude to life, the attitude of an amateur. I don't know. Um, I mean, certainly, what is interesting, of course, is that I think Swann is either full Jewish or half Jewish, but Proust was half Jewish. His mother was Jewish. Proust ascended to the height of Parisian society, and not as an artist. He did it by sheer force of will and somewhat obsequious charm. Um, he was terribly ingratiating until they kind of had enough and went okay. He became an artist later, and then pretty much went to bed in his cork-lined room, and you know, well, he did go to parties, but was a very sort of pale, ghost-like figure. So Swann is telling us something about Proust, um, and we get on later in the book to the Dreyfus Affair, which was the big controversy in French society when a Jewish officer in the French army was unfairly and wrongly convicted of treason. Um, but it's interesting that he makes Swann Jewish. It's interesting that he makes Swann a dilettante to a certain degree and someone who's um, ascended to society, which is Proust's journey. Um, the other thing which I think is remarkable about it is just how poisonous his love becomes. And in fact, I don't think it's got anything to do with Odette after a certain point. It's just a self-lacerating um, expression of something inside Swann, and Odette is merely the object on which that sublimated need attaches itself to. And for those who haven't got to the end yet, I mean, it does have the most remarkable last 2 pages. But yes, but there is, for me, the most precise and insightful moment is when for a man, this is when Swann has to relentlessly question Odette on her behaviour. He thinks to be relieved of the need to know, but actually, deep down, he knows it is to experience more pain as what he needs to know becomes real, and that she is, it seems, incapable of denying him what he already knows. So when he questions her about whether she may have had some kind of lesbian encounter, she just bats it away until she's bored, and then she just says, well, of course, this woman beckoned me behind a rock and I knew what she wanted, therefore saying it's been the first time. And the fact that she'd had, other lovers, she does it in this way which suggests such indifference to the effect. And that's probably right, because it's Swann's business that he wants to feel that. I've sort of changed my, after 30 years, I've changed my mind about Odette. I still find her enormously attractive when she's in her boudoir with all the silks and pillows and candles, and it's a particular fin de siècle, a feel of sensual, eroticism. It's quite difficult to not find appealing on, a fairly superficial level. But I used to think that she was an archetype of some kind, of a certain kind of woman that uses men and then punishes them. But I don't think that's at all. I think she is fairly ingenuous in her behaviour, given her background, and that Parisian society is never going to let her go beyond where she is. She's making a life for herself, and it's Swann's addiction, Swann's capacity for addiction, Swann's capacity for that kind of punishment that I think is my kind of takeout, which tells me a lot about what I was like then, and tells me a lot about what I'm like now. But I would have made the mistakes Swann made 25 years ago. I will not make those mistakes again. But that's not to say I wouldn't be entranced for a moment by the somewhat sallow-skinned Odette. But I hope people who maybe found the beginning of Swann's Way difficult have had fun during Swann in Love. Many thanks. Bye-bye.